going. Early start this morning for one of our town hall conversations, but I'm really glad everybody that's here is here. And I've had this, I learned this from a mentor years ago. Used to worry about how many people came to meetings or who was there. And I just came to the conclusion years ago that all the right people are in the room, and that we just assume that that's the case. And so I think we can stretch that a little further to all the right people are in the Zoom. And so thank you all the right people for being in the Zoom this morning. I wanted to just say a couple of words about what we're doing. So really want these to be interactive and invite your participation and your comments and feedback. What's valuable about these opportunities to get together is really when you're sharing and we're sharing together, exchanging information and ideas back and forth. I think that's the richness of these experiences. And just a couple of words about a reason for doing these. Certainly one of our reasons is just to maintain momentum with our work around equity and inclusion. That I think our momentum has been threatened a lot over the last couple of years by COVID and shutdowns and not being on campus together. And so really interested in working to make sure that we do maintain our momentum. Just the opportunity to continue to learn and grow, that every time we get together in these conversations, I hear things that expand my thinking, new ideas, and hopefully you do as well. And so, so I think, to the point of the article around a culture of learning, I think trying to embrace that culture of learning through these processes and to offer opportunities for us to get together and learn from one another. And also I think very important with this work is just providing opportunities for involvement. And we have a lot of really smart, capable people that are part of our college. And these opportunities for involvement give us a chance to hear new ideas, give us a chance to think about new ways that we might better serve both our employees and our students. And so I'm glad you all are here and really appreciate it. We'll jump into the article in a couple of minutes, but let me turn it over to Tico first and see, Tico, if you have things you want to share.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, as Dr. Bowden said. And again, I agree. The ideal that what we are trying to do is to have as many people at the table as possible as we continue to expand the organizational change strategies or create those that we want to have. And so this is a way to do that. This is a way that we as a team, individuals that work here, can grow. And when we grow, our students benefit from that, and we benefit as well. And so Dr. Bowden and I and the leadership team are excited to have these opportunities to hear from you and to bounce ideas off of you all, and for you all, as Dr. Bowden said, to help make us better. And we think that this is a really good way to do that. So I'm excited to be a part. I'm excited to have the leadership team and all of you early this morning talking about diverse, inclusive culture. So yes, I agree, Tamara, coffee helps.
Tico, would you like to kick it off this time with talking about some of the things from the article that jumped out at you? And I'd like you go first this time, and I'll chip in with anything after you're done.
Sure, and I'll just do one or two so that we can open it up if there's discussion, and we can kind of go back and forth since we have a small enough group. But one of the things that really stood out to me, if you look at page 2, at least the way that I printed out, when it talked about developing the right culture can be a slow and difficult process. And I think there's power to that statement, because a lot of times we're like, hey, let's do this initiative. But the true change takes time, and it takes commitment, and then it doesn't always feel comfortable. So I really love when they talked about that. And another part of that is talked about although achieving a shift towards a learning culture will take longer than the diverse targets and initiatives. And in this case, they were paying out bonuses. they felt like this is what helps you change in the long run. And so I really, for me, that stood out because it goes back to further in the article where it talks about there isn't a one size fits all. And while we can borrow from frameworks and we can look at other strategies as a baseline, essentially, we still have to make some adjustments for our culture at PPCC. And so I think that is the piece that also takes a little time to get there.
Yeah, man, when you're done. For sure. Okay. I mean, get it whenever you want it, because I don't pay attention. So I have to, it doesn't have an auto shut.
Can we mute? Okay, thank you. And so those are the things that stood out for me as far as a starting point, us knowing that we're not trying to get this done overnight. We're trying to get this done as right as possible and leave room to assess and reassess and to make changes along the way. So anyway, anybody thoughts on that particular point or any of those points that I just mentioned? Maybe it resonated with you?
I would agree, Tico, that it is important to get it right and not to necessarily worry about the speed. I mean, we don't want to get hung up, as Dr. Bolton mentioned in the intro, you know, we got kind of sidetracked with life, right? And the realities of what was happening in real time. But now we have the opportunity to focus this effort back. And as you said, make it a team effort, not this group doing it and that group doing it. But I think being an inclusive institution, we're working towards that not being what we do, just what we do, but that's who we are. And making that type of change does take time, but it takes commitment and consistency and all of the things that I know you're going to be excellent in moving us forward and doing.
Yeah, I want to just thank you, Jackie. I want to chime in too that would love to hear anybody's thoughts about where they think we are in terms of our culture at Pikes Peak. Shifting culture is never something that happens fast. It is a long, ongoing process of, I think, kind of walking the talk of what our values are. And I think there are certainly people at Pikes Peak that probably think the culture is shifting too slow. They're probably think it's shifting too fast. But I think the work of shifting our culture authentically and really demonstrating our belief in our values by acting on those, not just talking about those, is how we do that. But it takes significant time for an organization of our size. But would love to hear what anybody thinks about where they feel our culture is as a college.
So good morning, everybody. So I've been at the college now 10 years, and it has changed to become more of a learning culture and more of a inclusive culture. One of the things that I liked about the article, or one of the lines that it said, was identify new employees who are curious and open to change. I mean, I think that's something that when I first started, I would say was not a common feeling I had when interacting with some folks. And I feel like that has changed a lot. And that the idea of being open and open to change and being curious about new ways of doing things is more accepted now. And it's less, openness and new ideas are appreciated instead of squashed, which is, and maybe that feels different for other people. That's how it's felt for me.
Any idea what has precipitated that change for you or for anybody else on the call that we might be more open to new ideas?
I mean, from my perspective, I think it comes from a leadership team who says that that's what we're interested in. So, I mean, I'll from my perspective, when Homer joined the leadership team and kind of made clear that was the expectation, was that we would be open to new ideas and trying things, and that really freed a lot of people up to feel like they could do more than just this little box. And so I think that then allowed that to kind of be pervasive throughout the team. And I think for others, I'm sure that there's other people, but that was my specific experience.
Thank you.
Others, as you're thinking about where our culture stands, or what does right look like? How will PPCC know when we get it right? Or how will we know when we're on the right track? So what are your thoughts? And if you could think of any specific examples, what does inclusive excellence look like at Pikes Peak Community College, from your opinion? And you may only have one piece to kind of add at that, and that's okay as well. Thoughts?
Tico, I wish it was more systemic. I wish it wasn't like, I kind of equate it to sustainability. When I look at blueprints from when I was a student of the college, I don't see any hydration stations on the blueprints. As we moved into a green campus and we made that a priority to be a green campus, when you look at blueprints now, you might see places in the blueprint, in the actual building of new places on campus. And I wish that diversity and inclusion and equity would be like that for the college. That's not something that we're trying to put in right away, that it's automatically built in to whatever it is the college is doing. It's not an afterthought.
Carrie, I think you make a very important part. Tell me what that looks like. So you were able, when you outlined it for sustainability, what would be one example of, hey, if I see this, I would identify this as a piece of the blueprint. So what does that look like in the context of equity and inclusion? And you can think about it and we can come back to you if you want.
Well, I know for me personally, I like to hear all sides of a story. Like all sides from every perspective, not just one story, not just one person's. Like when we have panels, for me, I want to hear, what was that person thinking when they did that? What was their mindset? Were they, has this been a lifetime cultural thing with them? Were they have never liked African Americans, or always had that mindset that for some reason they're the crime makers, or they're this or they're that? Like, I'm not saying what they did was right, but the only way to change that mindset is to know what the mindset was in the first place. Because it starts way beyond people getting into these roles, right? It starts when they're younger in the home. And for me, I just like to hear all the information, all the sides of a story.
Gary, thanks for your comments. One of the things you remind me of is something that we've talked about a lot in our team, is around how equity and inclusion becomes a core part of what we do, not just something that's off to the side that we do a couple of training seminars every year around, but it's really embedded in all of the areas that we work in and operate in. So, for example, one of the things that we've talked about is we approach strategic planning, and we look back at our last plan, and we have this specific goal around diversity, equity, inclusion. One of the ways that we might approach that differently in terms of it being systemic in our organization is that every goal we have might have a component of it that's related to equity and inclusion, instead of equity and inclusion being something else that looks a bit separate from the rest of our work. And I think that's an issue that I've really identified, I'd say, over the last year or so as being a real opportunity for us, is how do we embed this work in whatever we do?
So I'll just interject here, just keeping an eye on the chat. There's a couple things that have come through. Looks like Nate and Jackie have shared some articles, one looking at the numbers of diversity program failures. That was also from the Harvard Business Review. Thanks for that, Nate. And Jackie, looks like there's a TED Talk on the danger of a single story, which speaks to what Carrie was speaking about just a moment ago. So thanks for sharing that, Jackie. And then a comment, Janet, I'm pondering the use of guided pathways for our team. If we hire you as a student staff, if it aligns with your aspirations, how can we keep you by creating a sense of a pathway to permanently joining our team?
Well, I'd love to hear more about any of those. Nate, if you're on, we won't have time, I think, to look at this article and comment on it during this time. So would you like to share some of that? I'm super curious what the direction of that article, what direction it's taking, what information they're uncovering.
Yeah, it's mainly looking at, if you notice the date of it, it's about 5 years old. It talked more about how we recognize the problem, but instead of small conversations and positive conversations seem to work better than the top-down massive diversity trainings to get buy-in. And they've done some quantitative study behind that and looked at the numbers in it. Obviously, things have changed in the last 5 years, but I think it was worth looking at other folks' failures to see what we can avoid.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm always happy to know where the potholes are ahead of time instead of finding them all myself. One thing that I would note from Nate's comments, and this was in the article that we did, we explored last spring, the Deloitte article, is that big mandatory trainings, as he was pointing out, I think their track record is pretty poor in terms of really helping shape organizational culture. You know, an organization can do a lot of box checking by saying every employee has to go to this training, but I don't know that it necessarily really helps organizations. And in fact, the Deloitte article suggested that they were counterproductive. And so I'm really hoping that the approach we're taking here of doing things just like this small conversation allow us to really share what our values are around this, to talk about how we could do it better. I'm really interested in hearing a little bit more about some of the other things that were popping up there in chat. But I do agree that these top-down sort of forced training programs that big organizations have taken on, while it may allow them to go out in the public and say, well, we're doing this and here's the evidence, I would suggest that they are indeed often counterproductive and create a lot of resentment among employees. Janet, would love to hear about your thoughts around, it sounded like sort of guided pathways for employment. Did I pick that up right?
Yeah, so we've been trying to do a better job of making sure that people are feeling represented in the high school programs office. But I don't know, I don't want it to feel like a one-off. If we're going to be intentional about who we hire and making sure that we're representative of our student body, how can we retain those folks? How can we help them develop a sense of a path forward in high school programs?
Yeah, well, I think this is super important and really relevant to where we are in this moment today. You know, we've been looking at our own data as a college, and during the third quarter of this calendar year, we lost almost 10% of our employees, and you know, we had huge losses of experience and knowledge at the college. And just looking back at our paper, I see there's an area that I highlighted here that said one study found that 47% of people actively looking for new jobs cited company culture as the main reason. So about half the people that are changing jobs out there, at least at the time this was published, and it's it's November 21 paper, so it's very current. Half the people out there who are looking for new jobs were citing company culture as as the main reason that they were looking, and which is pretty astonishing to me. You know, I keep thinking, and I still believe this, that we need to pay our employees better, and I'm not moving away from that, but I think there's another component of this. How do we make sure that we are creating a culture where people believe that they have opportunities to grow, opportunities to be promoted, opportunities to learn new skills and add to their toolbox and add to their value and be compensated for it. And so also note that in just the next paragraph in this paper, it says 80% of respondents to a Deloitte survey reported that inclusion is an important factor in choosing an employer. So as we think about trying to find and retain the best talent we can for our college, I think this is a huge issue. I mean, I think this is really central to what makes high-performing organizations. It's high-performing people and teams. And those are really built by being able to identify the most talented people and hold on to them, not both hire them and retain them. And I would say for every employer, certainly in the United States right now, this is just a huge issue right now. Front headline every day on sort of running organizations is the workforce and attracting and retaining talent.
Can I add one thing to what you're saying about thinking about guided pathways for employment? For me, that also speaks to creating a sense of belonging, which is an important piece of equity and inclusion. And it's really hard to measure, but I do really think it's important, especially for our students, to feel a connection on campus somewhere. And student employment is one of the ways that happens, as long as those students do feel valued and that they're part of a team and that they can envision a path forward, whether it's in our office or some other way they feel connected.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it doesn't align with them, like they're not wanting to support the high school programs team, how can we help you feel welcome at the college? Right? How can we find a place for you to feel welcome here?
I agree. And as you're employed, right? I tell people when I was younger, I took whatever job, restaurant, whatever I needed to do, right? But as I got older, I didn't join jobs, I joined teams. And I looked at what team is a better fit for me. How can I add value to the team, and how can I get value from the team? And so as I'm older, that becomes more and more important. And I would say, in addition to joining teams, right? Because they say people don't quit companies, they quit managers. Is kind of how they frame that. And so I think that's important. But I also think that visibility and leadership is important as well. So when people can see people that look like them, or people can hear various ideals and concepts, that is also a way that we build a sense of belonging. One of the examples that I talk about from visibility is that we talked about, hey, everybody can be, the president of the United States of America. But for people of color, that didn't seem like a reality until we saw a person of color in that particular office, right? And so I think we could go down the road. I use Meghan Markle. People talked about everybody could be a princess, but it wasn't until you saw an actual princess of color per se that you thought you can be those things. And I think it's the same way with our students. When they see themselves reflected in classrooms and instruction and non-instruction, right? And then as far as us as staff, when we see ourselves reflected. So I was just speaking that to say, Jim, that can be sometimes a way that we measure a sense of belonging based upon how people are telling us that they see themselves or feel connected to the values of the organization. Others thought, we're teachers, we can start calling on people by name.
Tico, I want to follow up on your comment around seeing people role models in leadership positions. I had the opportunity last night to host the other presidents of the higher ed institutions in Colorado Springs. So we had the superintendent president of the Air Force Academy, the new president of Colorado College, and the president of UCCS to dinner. And 10 years ago, when I started here, we did some similar things. We've been doing it for years. And I noticed last night the change. 10 years ago, when the presidents of the 4 organizations got together and everybody brought their wife or husband or partner, it was all white people in the room. Last night, I was the only white person in the room among the presidents. And so we have a person of color who's now the superintendent in charge of the Air Force Academy, the new president of Colorado College, and of course, Venkat Reddy at UCCS. And so what a remarkable change over this 10 years of just what the leadership of our higher ed institutions looks like in Colorado Springs. And I thought that was something to celebrate.
So others, things that stood out for you about the video, about the article.
I'll throw another question out alongside Tico's, which is around creating a sense of belonging. This feels to me that the sense of belonging and the maintaining the culture of our organization, especially and incredibly difficult in this time of COVID when we're not getting together in person as we have for as long as we've been in existence as college. How might we do things to support a greater sense of belonging in this time right now for employees or for our students? And I think both are critical.
Well, I know for me, Dr. Bolton, I love our students, and I've made it during COVID when we weren't allowed on campus and we weren't allowed to see them in person. I think I was more effective than they were. And I started calling them. I made it a point to call them twice a week. My caseload of students, 56 students. And, just to say, hey, how are you doing? What does your COVID world look like? What are you watching on TV? What are you binge? Just to have a normal conversation. And one week I forgot, and I had students calling me to see how I was doing because I was their person during that time, their outlet, just to have a conversation on the phone.
That's awesome, Carrie. And what you're doing with those calls, even if it's as simple as just what are you doing, what are you watching on TV these days, that's creating community and belonging. They feel connected to you. Obviously, they're worried about you when you don't call, which is awesome.
So Dean Hudson, I'm going to call on you. You've been here almost 30 years. What are some of your thoughts, ideals, or comments that you would share with us around this creating a learning culture?
Thanks for calling on me, Tico, but I have to remind you that you left our team, so I just want to say that. The one thing that I've really seen here is I've seen a lot of growth over the years and almost decades. From when I first started here at Pikes Peak compared to where we are now, it's really night and day, which is really fantastic. The big things that I always take away is, we want to make sure that our college is a safe zone for our students. And the one thing that I've picked up a couple quick comments. When we have student forums where students come in and they express their challenges, that's really impactful. I've learned so much from that. The other thing that I've always said is that, when we have our students in the classroom, we have a really great opportunity for them to learn. And those students are going to leave Pikes Peak. They're going to become future employers. They're going to be a big part of our community in the future. So we have a great opportunity to pass along our knowledge and, see where we go. But I think the more that we engage with efforts in the classroom or as an organization, it's just going to be better for the community in the future.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Others?
So there was an idea in the article about this that I thought was worth exploring, and this idea of reverse mentoring programs where, yeah, so staff across the college would be mentoring leadership in a way, and it reminded me there was either Washington Post or New York Times article recently about how millennial managers were struggling with Gen Z employees, and this idea of reverse mentoring in that case could be tremendously beneficial, because there was so much to learn from, and obviously these are broad brushes, but Gen Z culture that was very different than the work mindset of the millennial generation. So I mean, that is a way to create a sense of belonging, is having that mutual dialogue between different groups and especially different generational groups.
I agree, Kevin. I think that's so sometimes underrepresented, is that cross-generational diversity or an inclusion, and each of us feeling like we can learn. I don't know about you, but I thought about this. I watched this show called Chicago Fire, and they have all these people. They were doing an example of what it looked like across generations, and they had it to where all the 911 systems were down. Nothing could work. You couldn't get any calls in, and they brought some of the more seasoned folks in who set up this manual process because they knew what it was like before everything was automated. And so it just became this beautiful scene of showing how we need each generation to help us be better. And so I thought they did an amazing job at that particular point. So.
And this article I was reading was also talking about how the younger generation just has a different sense of what work culture is like, and that it can be a lot more flexible in a lot of ways, and that's tough for a public institution that has a lot of rules to live by. And so anyway, I think it's just worth thinking through and seeing how that cultural shift from the younger generation can shift the way in which public institutions do their business.
Yeah, good point. Just this morning, there was a lengthy NPR story, similar, talking about the flexibility in the workplace and the challenges that some older managers or leaders are having with adapting to a more flexible work culture, and how much a lot of our younger employees may desire that. And that's creating tension and friction in organizations. I expect that the same is true in our organization in some places, although I think in general, we've really tried to embrace a flexible workplace that really allows folks to be both off campus as well as working at different times. There might be more we could do with that. I think right now we're limiting to only 2 days a week, but I think as we go forward, based on what I'm seeing, I think we're accomplishing our tasks well as a college, and we certainly could consider doing more of that and opening that up even farther. But again, it does really create challenges around connection on campus and that feeling of connectedness and a feeling of belonging, and I think a sense of being part of something greater than oneself when you're not physically on campus and with people. But maybe that's just my old outdated thinking, and that's actually not necessarily true for younger workers. So I'd be curious about feedback.
Well, as someone who doesn't necessarily fit into the younger category, I think my struggle is really giving myself permission to take advantage of the alternative work scheduling. It's like I feel, and this isn't really related to the diversity discussion, but maybe that equity and inclusion piece more so, is that I feel that I have to justify and quantify and prove that while I'm not on campus, I am actually working. Whereas I think employees and staff members from a younger generation, they're like, I have a project, I'm working through my project, I'm doing my work and it's done, and they don't have that pressure. So I think I'm speaking for myself, I make it harder for myself to embrace this more flexible culture because I'm fighting being accountable.
But really just with yourself, right?
Yes, it's with myself. It's no pressure from leadership or from my colleagues or anyone. It is with myself. So I think that's part of that generational difference that Kevin was kind of alluding to there, that the younger generation.
You went on mute, Jackie.
You're
We can't hear
muted.
you. Jackie, we can't hear you.
See, I need a reverse mentor in so many ways. I mute myself and technology is still a struggle, but as Kevin was talking about that reverse mentor, that's where I would benefit from someone, in a different stage in life to say, we can feel connected, we can be included, but it doesn't have to be, in the A building in this office at this time. We can do it in other ways. But yeah, that's my own struggle with myself.
I agree with you, Miss Jackie. It was hard for me to think about when you think about everything we do on campus every day. And I don't know, does HR still want us writing everything we do when we work from home? Like, I felt like they were giving me the freedom to work from home, but then they wanted me to document everything I do during the day. It's like, why? I don't do that at work. So why would I have to do it if I'm working from home?
Boy, I don't know where that's coming from, Carrie. Kim, are you on to?
I am on, and I have no idea where that's coming from. HR has never asked for documentation.
Wow.
Individual departments may have, but that was nothing that we had
Okay.
expected at all. No, I think everyone's an adult, and if you're working remotely, you're working remotely.
Goodness knows, I can't imagine who would even look at that.
Yeah, I did it the whole time we were on COVID, out for COVID. Every Friday, I would turn in my list.
And I would say, Carrie, in addition to that, I would hope that we have learned a lot since those initial times of when we first started. Because I know I was putting every minute, from 12 to 1, I did this, I did that. But then I realized in my case, nobody was asking me to do that. But I felt compelled to do it, much like what Jackie is saying. So I would hope now we've gotten better, hopefully, around understanding that you can be just as efficient at home, working remotely for some of us. So anyway, so I hope that's still not the case. If so, if we talk offline.
Yeah.
Well, and Tico, I think there's something to take from this. I mean, so the learning culture piece of this, that to your point, we have learned a lot. And one of the things that we've learned is that people are very effective, very productive working from remote environments. And we've seen that over and over at the college from all different parts of the college. And I think that this shift to working remotely, I mean, there's some component of this that is really accelerated cultural change around accepting this. And I understand exactly what, like Jackie, what you're talking about. If working for the last, for those of us that are more seasoned employees, working meant going to the office, and that it's meant that for decades for us. And so this concept of maybe I can work just as effectively from a remote location from home or wherever has been hard to get our heads around, I think. And I do think that there's this sense of somehow of like, well, if I'm working from home, no matter how hard I'm working, no matter how many things I'm producing, this sense of feeling guilty or that I'm not doing enough because I'm not visible in the office. And I'll admit I have some of that as well, but I'm really trying to let that go and trying to model that we can do that differently. And, you know, when I think about how this relates to the greater conversation around equity and inclusion, you know, again, I keep worrying about how people feel included if they're not on campus and they're not with others. And so I think maybe I need just what you were talking about, Kevin, some younger mentors to help me think through what does inclusion feel like if you're only coming to campus 2 days a week or that sort of thing. And so what might that feel like? And you know, certainly the equity part of it. I mean, there's some challenges around this that we have some jobs that are really conducive to working remotely, and we have some that are not. And so I think it has created some challenges for us around what feels equitable to various employees. And so I'm concerned about that as well.
So kind of circling back to the chat and specifically to something that Dean Hudson mentioned earlier about creating safe spaces. Question that came up is what does, sorry, scrolling back here, what is our definition of safe? And this is from Nate. I know I learn more when I'm put in a situation where I'm challenged by others. On the other hand, I want to know my physical safety is protected. So yeah, something that can mean a different definition for different people.
Nate, did you want to elaborate on what some of your thinking was behind that, or?
Well, I guess to be able to challenge ideas is really, I see the root of the college experience. And sometimes that takes us to places that are uncomfortable. And frankly, I think we need to go there. On the other hand, we need to make sure that we aren't assaulting each other or, you know, the physical safety has to be protected. And I feel like sometimes one side says, oh, we should never be safe, and the other side says we should always be safe. And the best area is like Goldilocks, somewhere in the middle.
You know, I think you bring up a good point. So when I, and I'm happy to, once everybody talk, I'll put this article if I can find it real quick, but it's the ideal of safe versus brave spaces, right? And so we used to use this terminology around equity and inclusion, diversity work around, we got to feel safe, we got to feel safe. But more so we shifted that to saying, wait a minute, we've got to be authentic and true. So we need to be brave in the space that we're in, knowing that there will be discomfort, knowing that we might not agree. Because the ideal, like in this group, if I was in a room with you, I would assume that my physical safety was there, that no one's gonna be waiting outside of the office with a bat for me, right? So I would give some assumption of safety. But then, so what we have to do is, but how do we be brave? How can we be brave to have this conversation? And so I will look for that article, but it talks about safe versus brave spaces and what's necessary, and knowing that the uncomfortable and the different ideals are going to come, and that we can, I don't want to say heated, you know, we might have some elevated dialogue and conversation, but we will manage that, and we will be in there, and we will be brave to hear those different ideals. So I think shifting from safe to more brave spaces makes sense to me as we further these conversations.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that distinction between safe and brave, Tico, because safe, it could imply, or it may be perceived as there's the possibility of it being unsafe, right? Versus brave means that you're being your authentic self and bravely sharing. So I can see how that could be. I appreciate that difference there too. But to Nate's point, I agree that I've been in situations or circumstances on campus and in conversations that, as you said, Nate, they were needed conversations. But I felt like, okay, if we tick this up 2 or 3 more notches, it might become unsafe. And so then the conversation kind of shuts down. So how do we kind of condition or create a team or a climate where we're engaging in brave conversations versus safe or unsafe conversations?
Yeah, all great feedback here, and I appreciate this input as well, Nate and Tico and Jackie. And I think it's not just about physical safety, but there are brave conversations and uncomfortable spaces that we need to be willing to occupy. But there's also has to be, and I think we're very good at this at Pikes Peak, you know, respectful disagreement, if that's where folks are, that we can disagree with one another without attacking one another's character or value as person. And so I think making sure that part of our culture remains, and you know, maybe we're not doing a great job in this everywhere, but I think in most of the conversations I'm in, we are, is that we're able to respectfully disagree, respectfully present alternative ideas to one another without attacking one another. And I think that can be appropriately uncomfortable without feeling unsafe.
Yeah, and it looks like there's been some additional resources shared in the chat around brave spaces, both from Tico and Kim as well. So thank you both for that. And then thank you, Kim, as well, for kind of circling back and explaining that requirement that came up earlier about tracking hours. Looks like that was something specific to the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. So she explains that a little bit more. That might have been a little bit where some of the confusion came from earlier. And we are all caught up on comments, it looks like.
Hey, one last thing from the article that I want to put out and see if we can get some feedback. And Kevin alluded to this earlier, and I was noticing that he did, because it was something I highlighted in the article today that had not caught my eye as much last week. And I'll just read these two sentences. It says, leaders can design organizational structures, systems, and processes to support the evolution towards a learning-centric culture. This may include adjusting hiring and interview procedures to identify new employees who are curious and open to change. I wonder if anybody has any thoughts about what that looks like. And can you imagine Pikes Peak being an institution that demonstrates through our hiring process not only a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, but a really valuing curiosity and openness to change? And what might that look like?
Well, I'll just say I had the opportunity to explore that thought process a little bit this summer when I was involved with hiring a cadre of coaches for some of our new programs that we have. And what I was looking for in that process was individuals who were excited about helping our students become their best selves. But how did I know or determine if they met the descriptors that you mentioned, Dr. Bolton, and that Kevin alluded to from the article there? Part of it was really scrutinizing their cover letters and resumes to see some of the things that they had been involved with and some of the projects that they had been involved with that kind of demonstrated this openness, this willingness to appreciate diversity and really being open to new ideas, right? And so, you know, out of that process, I hired a young man who was in Virginia, but he came to the United States from England because he wanted something new and this opportunity. So all of that to say, I think through the questions that we asked, through really looking at the resumes and looking at the people, what the people potentially will bring to the organization when we're hiring them. And what I learned, I think, when we did our faculty fellows interview is really not just this staunch question and answer. And I think, Dr. Bolton, you modeled this. I've seen you model this in several instances, but really being willing to engage in a conversation as you go through the interview process, not just answer this and, we do ask, so I know Kim is on the call, so I want to be HR appropriate. We do ask all questions, everyone the same questions, but being willing to follow up and allow people to expand on some of their experiences, and that will kind of give you a sense. That's how I was able to do it with some of the coaches that we offered, and I think that they are a great, excited, open, very diverse group, but I think that's how we can do it.
Thanks, Jackie. You're exactly right about that. I appreciate that. Where my head went with that is I was thinking about some of the kind of wacky things that I've heard places like Google or Apple would include in interview processes. And, these questions that I think try to get at people's ability to be creative, but also seem a bit outlandish. That, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? Kind of questions. And so I was just curious about your thoughts.
I agree. And I think sometimes, are we looking for people that looks like us, or are we looking for people who could actually do the job? Because sometimes we're like, oh, I love this about this person. And if that resonates with you, they become a front runner. Where I think we have to go back, and Dr. Bowden, you had talked about this too, even Kim as well, scrutinizing the minimum qualifications. Do we really need a person with a minimum of a PhD to do A, B, or C? And really seeing that, is that something we like, or is that something we need, or an individual needs to do the job? So I think really looking at some of those questions, like you said, the interview questions, allowing people to show up in a way that's authentic to them. So they may not necessarily articulate something the same way, but they really can still get to the same place, even though they might get there differently. So I think a lot of the talking through, and Kim and I, and all of us have been in conversation about hiring practices, policies, and making sure that they support us hiring and diversifying our workforce.
Yep, right on.
So I would say, in addition to that, that it's important as well to show that Pikes Peak is a place, make that attractive to people who are curious and who are open-minded and who are open to change, and show that in the interview process, and show that on the website, because otherwise those people may not even apply for those positions. I'm fairly new in my position. I started in August, but when I was looking at the job description, I was excited because I saw a lot of emphasis on equity and inclusion and diversity just in the description of my position, right? And kind of exploring the website. And in the interview, I felt in my second interview with Kevin and with Zach, I felt like they would be people very open, flexible, give me freedom and responsibility. And since then, Kevin, you're really good at that, accepting new ideas and listening to thoughts. Because the reality is leadership can't have contact with all the staff and can't have contact with all the students. And so, sometimes we have experiences that leadership doesn't necessarily have or hear about. And so I appreciate that openness to, oh, interesting, that's, you experienced that with a student. Let's dig deeper into that and take a look at that. And so kind of all encompassing just that idea of even if something may be uncomfortable or we would be nervous about sharing it, knowing that that idea would be respected, even if it's not ultimately accepted. And then just kind of that openness, open-mindedness and flexibility kind of showing from the beginning of the hiring process, I think is important as well.
One of the things, just following on that, one of the things that caught my eye in the article is this idea of part of a learning culture is creating a space for failure. And I'm both really intrigued and sort of puzzled by that, in the sense of, as an organization, you want to move forward, you want to keep making progress, but what does failure look like along the way? And what is the culture, how does the culture respond to that failure? And I think that's a really interesting balance.
Well, good question, both. And so I want to take a moment and just highlight, I think something Janae pointed out that's really important is that if we want to attract diverse candidates, if we want to hold on to diverse and talented workforce, I think we have to model back to people what we're looking for. And so if a candidate is looking at Pikes Peak, are we looking to them like a place that is open and curious and diverse and values inclusion in our workplace? And so I think that's a really good challenge to us around how we do that. I think the issue with the failure, Jim, is interesting. You know, when I think about this, you know, maybe another allusion to the sort of West Coast tech culture of, it's almost sort of like a badge of credibility that you've failed a number of startups. And so what I think is important in our culture is that there is space for people to innovate and safety around doing that we can make innovations in our culture, that we can do things differently. And that if you try to better serve our college, our students in some way, and you put something innovative out there and it doesn't work, that you're not penalized for that, that you're still celebrated for innovation and for efforts to make us better.
I agree.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Reed.
Oh, no.
I was going to say, I think sometimes failure, when I mentioned earlier about the part in the article that talked about developing the right culture can be a slow and difficult process. I think sometimes failure can come by being too over ambitious, right? So like we really want to do all these things and we start putting them out there and we don't do, you know, any one thing really well. And so I think failure sometimes is you learning that you have way too many things on the plate, and how do you bring those things to make sure that they're strategic and that they're measurable and that they make sense. And so, for example, with all of the groups, I'm happy to own this on the affinity groups. I thought, yeah, I'm going to record all these. We're going to get this and people can get to it. And I did that. And then I realized that if you're in your breakout room, it's not recording. If you're on break, it's not recording. So what I found out is that maybe about 20% of the 2 hour or 30% of the calls actually were recorded, right? And so I own that, like that was just a miss, you know, and I know that's simplifying the process, but it's saying this didn't work. I thought it was going to work. Now I've got to come back and I've got to think of another way to make this work better, and being okay with that, if that makes sense. So that's just a very minuscule way of what I thought, well, that wasn't a hit like I thought it was going to be. So.
Yeah, we've all been there, Tico, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. Hey, we're coming up on time. I want to make sure to get out an invitation to everybody who's on this meeting today, that if you have an article you'd like to suggest for a future town hall conversation like what we're doing today, I would love for you to send that to Tico or to me or to both of us. We're looking for things that offer engagement and interest to the college around the topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've decided very intentionally to move away from trying to do books, because the investment in time can just be so large for a lot of really busy, very stressed folks that are part of our teams. You know, instead of having to put hours and hours and hours into reading a book, you know, we're looking for things that might be 30 minutes or an hour at most article that that people can engage with and then come to these conversations. So if you have a suggestion, we'd love to see that. And certainly my intention to keep these conversations going. Tico, you get the last word.
We just want to thank you all for your time and your attention and joining us in this conversation today. These are the things that allow us to move forward as an organization, reading, speaking, saying, watching, and having conversation about similar things around equity, inclusion, and diversity. And so we appreciate your time, and we welcome your ideals and any innovative thoughts that you have. So. All right, bye everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.